guys, welcome back. So let's go over some arrays in Java. So the first kind of array that you're going to learn about is the basic Java array, and it's actually a fixed array. So you might not have encountered fixed arrays yet unless you're familiar with another language like C++. But fixed arrays mean they only have one size from beginning to end, right? So once you declare a size for that array, it never changes. And in fact, when you initialize the array, it already has that many values. Now it'll initialize it to some default value depending on what type the array is, but this is how you declare it. So let's make an array of integers of the primitive type int. So what you're going to do is you're going to declare the type that the array will hold, and it will only ever hold that type. And then you put the brackets, and that indicates that it's going to be an array type. So int my array, and you can initialize it on the same line by saying new int. But you do have to indicate how large it's going to be. So as soon as it gets initialized, it's going to go about allocating memory for that size. So it knows exactly how big an integer is, and it knows to allocate 5 times that many spaces, that many bits in memory. So in this case, if I did a 5-item array. Again, you can actually, as you can see in the notes below, you can actually declare it without indicating the size at first, but you can't really do anything with it at that point. If you tried to print it at this point, it would error out and say, hey, it may not have been initialized yet. But just know that you can initialize it, or not initialize, declare it first without initializing it. But I'm going to just go ahead and initialize and declare on the same line. So right now, let's just see what happens when, I have some stuff down here. Let's just see what happens when I print it. So let's run it. Well, first we'll compile, and then we'll run it. And what comes out is the string representation of that array. So it's not an error, it's not actually gobbledygook. It is, the bracket represents that it's an array, the I represents what type the array holds, and then at this address in memory. So there is some significance there, but it won't be very useful for you for looking at what's inside the array. I'm gonna actually do a small for loop. Let's print it all out so we can actually see what is actually inside this. I haven't assigned anything yet. All I've said is make an array with 5 elements in it, right? So let's see what Java did for us, what the JDK did. So I'm gonna just make a normal for loop, and we'll go over this in the next lesson, so I'm not gonna go over it too much. My array dot length. I could have just said 5 because I know the length, but we'll be good coders here. And actually, I'll just take the same statement. So again, I'm not going to print, I'm going to print my array at I to see what the value is. So just like you would in any other arrays that you guys may have dealt with before, when you want to get an item out of an array, a normal array, you can use that bracket notation. So let's see what happens now. And interestingly, it is an array, but it defaults to have 5 zeros in it. So that's just how arrays behave. It'll default to whatever the value is for that particular type. So you might want to go review what the default types are for those primitive values. Okay, so let's just do some examples. If you want to make a string array, let's say, we're going to go the same route, and I'll just say, let's say I do an array of fruits. So to hard code values into an array and set some off the bat if you know what they are. And again, you probably won't do this too much in coding because not a lot is hard coded, right? It all takes user input and whatnot. But for learning, let's see, what fruit should we put in our array? Let's do banana, pear. Oh, I love papaya. We'll do papaya, and then I guess kiwi. Oh, that is not the way you do it. So just like you have done in other languages, you have to separate all of the elements by commas, but do notice that you don't use square brackets for arrays in Java, you use curly brackets. And again, we have to have our obligatory semicolon. So So great. So now when you initialize this fruits array, it already knows that the length is going to be 4, and it will forever be 4, but you've initialized it with some values. Now you can manipulate it as you would any normal array. So if I wanted to switch, let's say kiwi and banana, I could do, well, first I want to store a temp value. And then I'll assign that bucket to the last value. Roots dot length -1. So you can actually access the size of the array with fruits.length. So if you've done JavaScript, this will look very familiar. And to get the last index, of course, because it's a 0-based array, indexed array, then you're going to get the last index by doing the length -1, right? So, so now I've set that 0, index 0 to the last one. Now I can finally set the last index. I'll just copy it here to temp. All right, and since I have this here, I'm going to copy it so we can print it and see what's in it. This will be fruits. Fruits. Let's run it again. Oh, I didn't save. Let's try it one more time. Awesome. So it printed out the first array, which was 0. There's nothing in it. And then it printed out the second array. So similarly, when you have an array that doesn't have anything in it, you'll want to populate it with things, right? So I might want to, as soon as I initialize that int array, for example, I have it initialized, it's got 5 zeros in it, so almost immediately I'll probably want to put stuff in it. So my array at 0, let's just go with, I don't know, 4. And then I'll assign a whole bunch of other values. Cool. So this time it should actually print all of those values that I assigned. So let's try it again. You'll see my mistake. That's why copying code is always a bit dangerous. I just assigned 0 over and over again. If you caught that, you've got a good eye. All right. So that's the basics of arrays. The other thing that a lot of students get tripped up on is you cannot add to the end of this array. You cannot take away from the end of this array. The size is always the same, so no pushing, no popping. But that will come later with array lists, which is a different type, which is more dynamic, a lot more flexible, has a lot more features. All right, have fun.